driving. That includes being theologically conservative. I want to know and believe what is true, and am willing to challenge my beliefs because I do think there is truth that we can know. So if you're easily offended, this is not a safe space for you. Today is May 11, 2021, and this is broadcast number 239. Today, Professor Dr. Vishal Mangalwadi joins us to talk about his newly released book, Towards a Third Education Revolution. My name is Don Vino. I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcast, and our senior researcher, and he's even a friend, Ron Enzel, who will introduce the sponsors of today's webcast. And here is Ronnie, baby.
Greetings from sunny Florida, where the palm trees came out, saw their shadows, and now we have 12 more months of summer. Our sponsors we are down to one sponsor per show now. That's what we do. Our sponsor for this week's edition of the Unknown Webcast is Jack's General Deconstruction, subverting the best to palm off the rest. Since 1966, Jack's General Deconstruction. And our regular legal disclaimer, our guest on today's webcast, insert name here, that's Vishal Mangalwadi, has no connection whatsoever to any of the satirical content of the Unknown Webcast, hereafter known as the Webcast, although we probably will not mention it again. The satirical content includes any and all commercials, end credits, puns, smart remarks, or anything else that might fall into the definition of satire. In the meantime, Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. bears no liability for or responsibility for anyone's opinions regarding this satirical content, straight from the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. So, maybe instead of just responsibility for anyone's opinions, maybe I should insert being triggered and things like that. We need to fill this out just to make sure we're totally covered on all of our legal bases. So our regular notice, the opinions expressed on this webcast are ours and should be yours too. If you enjoy the Unknown Webcast, or if it really annoys you and you want to inflict it on someone else to ensure your continued access to this program, please go to midwestoutreach.org, click the yellow donate button, and contribute as you feel led. And don't forget to subscribe to us on your favorite video channels. So, hello there, Vishal Mangalwadi. I hope I'm pronouncing that name correctly.
Very well. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are glad to have you. And as we tell our first-time guest always, once we are done, you will know you have been had.
Yes, you will. So,
we spoke on Sunday a little bit, and I was very excited to get to know Vishal a little better. We've had a number of email exchanges and that sort of thing. And I mentioned that he's an apologist that I was relatively unaware of, although he's been around, more than a month. He's been around a while.
More than a month.
And his response was interesting. He said, I don't call myself an apologist. Others do. What do you see yourself as?
Well, I see myself as someone who is driven primarily with compassion for the poor, oppressed, downtrodden, but that involves uprooting the ideas that have caused suffering and poverty. So I'm a theological provocateur who is a disruptor.
In other words, you're a troublemaker. Is that what you're trying to say?
A troublemaker is a simple word. Yes.
Provocateur, disruptor, troublemaker. It's a word that everybody can relate to.
Yes. So in my book, Truth and Transformation, I have two chapters. One is Jesus the troublemaker. The other is Paul the troublemaker. So in Jesus the troublemaker, I'm studying his compassion. Why was his compassion leading his critics to pick up stones to stone him or throw him down a cliff, etc.? And Paul the troublemaker, why did his preaching the simple gospel turn the world upside down? So the troublemaker is my favorite word, but I was trying to be slightly more sophisticated.
Yeah.
Well, as someone with actual credentials, theological provocateur and disruptor is a stated way of putting it. Troublemaker for us street fighters works way better.
Thank you. Yes, it did. I did land in jail a few times
Oh, really?
in India. And
I thought you meant on Twitter or Facebook. You're talking about the real thing. You're talking about real jail?
yes.
Okay.
Not
So,
Facebook jail, but
yeah,
actual real jail.
see, in
Isn't that
America,
amazing?
people complain about being in Facebook jail or social media jail of some kind, and you basically you say, "Here, hold my beer."
Yeah, that yes, those experiences are my credentials for being a troublemaker.
Yeah, I love it. Well, we are talking about, and I want to show you the cover in full form here, your latest adventure in authorship, the third education revolution. And for those who are watching, the link is, as always, in the description box for the Kindle version. The print version will be out, I think, over the next few weeks, you had mentioned.
Correct. In 3 weeks, we hope to have it in our hands.
Okay. And so you can order it on Amazon through that link. And the Kindle version is downloadable right now, even as we speak. The print version will be available hopefully in 3 weeks or so. Help us get the word out. This is a really important topic for a number of reasons. I just want to mention a couple things starting off here. In the People's Republic of Illinois, under Comrade Pritzker, who was thought of as our governor, we have now mandated by the Illinois government the teaching of critical race theory from K through 12. That's a problem. They are very confused about how we can identify male from female. They're no longer biological. There are 112 genders you can choose from. And so people aren't even not sure which showers or restrooms to use any longer. Our educational system is in disarray to some degree. And we've done some webcasts on education, especially over the last 18 months, but previously. So this is going to be a little more interesting because we're not just saying that the education system we have is in trouble. You are saying there's a solution, which is way better.
Exactly. Yes.
So I want to start off then with this. You've authored a number of books, 3 of which I'll name. The World of the Gurus, a critical look at the philosophies of India's influential gurus and mystics. In Search of Self, Beyond the New Age. That one intrigues me in light of everyone gravitating to the Enneagram today, trying to figure out who they are. The book that made your world, how the Bible created the soul of Western civilization. This is another hot topic these days with atheists like Tom Holland even writing, without the Christianity, we would not have Western civilization. In your book on page 25 and 26, first chapter, you write, imagine the students enroll in accredited universities and schools but attend classes in the local church. Professors come to church online. The poor students get to learn from the world's best teachers. Academic pastors mentor students individually and in small groups. Students save up to 75% on tuition and contribute to their family's economy. Students who cannot live with their parents room and board with elders and deacons trained to teach them the necessary life skills. An academic pastor revives the lost idea that teachers are God's gift to build up saintly character. She is a homeschooling parent trained to serve as a church college parent. In other words, an AP is a youth pastor version 2.0. He oversees students and arranges face-to-face seminars and webinars for students to interact with experts. He also teaches students to love their neighbors by devoting 6 hours a week to serve the needy in the local community. Students go physically to universities or science labs and institutions to learn what cannot be taught online. And then one other quick paragraph on page 27, you write, the education will also train thought leaders by offering courses in classic books, ideas, and biographies that have impacted history for better or worse. So, with that as kind of the lead in, you are proposing not just education, but entirely, is it new or just a ancient style of education that has been lost, forgotten, and abandoned being brought back?
No, it is new education in the sense that we never had technology available that we have it today. So 1,000 years ago, church was establishing universities because if a student went to the university, he wanted to read a book, he couldn't go to the market and buy a book. Nobody was printing.
Right.
He had to copy it, but he couldn't go into Walmart and Office Depot and buy paper because no one was manufacturing paper. So to copy a book, he had to first learn how to make paper. And so books were very expensive. Paper was so acidic that students were not allowed to touch the books. Professors were where the books were in monasteries or cathedrals, and students went to the teacher. This was a teacher-centered education because you didn't consult book, you listened to the teachers. But today, a student can access 1,000 libraries on his cell phone. So he doesn't have to learn from mediocre teachers. Every university has some good teachers, some mediocre teachers, and some useless teachers. They may be very good researchers, very good people, good mentors, but teaching is not their gift. And students are paying to listen, attend boring sessions because the teacher, who may be a good person, doesn't have teaching skills. Now, all of this has become unnecessary because one teacher, so we were talking yesterday with someone who has given outstanding lectures on Milton, 4 lectures. Now, if that was 1 credit in a course on English literature, and a student was paying only $1, if we can get those 4 lectures to 1 million students, the professor will make $1 million. And the church will make money. So there's no reason for students to listen to mediocre lectures and to continue with the tradition as it has existed. But this is not just about lectures. The proposal is to create a whole new ecosystem, which is bringing education back to truth, to virtue, to character, veritas and virtue.
Yes.
And bringing it under the moral authority of the church, because the church established all of the education, the first and second education revolutions, and it has now been handed over to the state and to the devil. And it is an attempt to take education back from the state, restore it to the church as a means of discipling nations.
So it's a big vision. You're not just saying we need to disciple individual children through adulthood. You're saying this is a worldwide effort is what you're striving for.
Correct. It includes creating an online encyclopedia, an online dictionary, because encyclopedia is dealing with worldview, and words deal with express worldviews. So with the gender confusion, if the secular worldview is no longer able to define what is male or what is female, what is a father, what is a mother, then the language is lost, because most of our languages, English included, are creation of Bible translators. Wycliffe impacts Chaucer, Tyndale impacts Bunyan and Milton. So Tyndale expressed through other translations such as Geneva and King James. They create Shakespeare. So Shakespeare is Geneva Bible. And you cannot understand Shakespeare if you don't understand Geneva Bible or the language. So in the West becoming postmodern or post-Christian, we have lost control of the language. American theologians, vast majority of them, sadly, no longer understand the difference between story and truth. So Bible schools such as Wheaton are becoming major problems because they don't know the difference between history and story, story and truth. So we have to create a dictionary where what Noah Webster had done 200 years ago, to take for the church, for the scriptures to take control of the language once again. So this is creating an entire ecosystem, not just courses and curriculum.
Okay, so you can communicate truth through story, but it is the truth that is important, not the narrative itself.
Yes, but there is a difference between story and truth.
Right.
In traditional English Bible, the word story is used mainly two times. Once in Matthew 28, that the guards say that when we were sleeping, disciples came and stole the body. And this story has circulated amongst the Jews. In the Old Testament, when Potiphar returns home and his wife tells him the story of what Joseph attempted in terms of raping her. So that's how the traditional Bible used the word story. But average American Bible teacher does not know how English Bible used the word story and why we were witnesses, not storytellers. So American missions are confusing global Christianity, that we should not be witnesses. That's old-fashioned. We should not be testifying to truth. We should be storying. We should be storytellers.
Oh, that is really interesting. I had never heard that. So two times, and both times there were false narratives, if you will, false stories. Otherwise, you are witnesses of what you have seen and heard, for example.
Exactly. Well, there are other uses of the word story, like when Paul was preaching, the young man fell from the third story. So I mean, we're not counting those. But basically, English language, history is a biblical discipline. India never had the word or concept of history. The Indian word itihas was used for myths and epics, that we should believe what is God's mighty works. The fact of history, that this is what actually happened. This is not a story. This has gone. There aren't historians in American universities who believe that a historian's job is to seek truth. History is a playground, and that's why British government stopped funding history departments 5-10 years ago, because the gays have a different history, lesbians and transgenders and blacks and Koreans and Chinese. Everybody has.
You couldn't fund history without taking a political stand, it sounds like.
Sure. So, well, that's what Wikipedia has done. Wikipedia began with a philosophy of neutrality, that if experts contradict each other, we will present both sides. We are not here to seek truth. So Wikipedia was very clear from the beginning. We are not here to seek truth. We are here to be neutral. But about a year ago, they gave up neutrality. And because neutrality is impossible, you have to take sides. So today, if you believe that marriage is one man, one woman, lifelong relationship, you cannot be an editor for Wikipedia, because they no longer believe in neutrality, that you are a bigot, a homophobe, and you cannot be an editor of Wikipedia. So most people are not aware of the terrible damage. Now Wikipedia is going out of its way to single out some of the great American men and women who are doing tremendous service, but who happen to be theophobic. They fear God. Therefore, they fear anything that God says is sinful. And Wikipedia is attacking that this guy is a homophobe. Don't buy the products of his companies. This is
Hmm.
because that industrialist is not Donald Trump. Nobody talks about him, but when Trump is excluded, then of course a lot of people get angry. But what is happening through the control of the current diabolical ecosystem of education, that the minds are being corrupted, and this book is calling for a revolution, that American church has the capacity to take education back from the state and from the devil. But American church has not had a theology of discipling nation. For 50 years, American missiologists and theologians have not been able to define the word nation. We've called nations as people groups.
People groups, right.
Yeah, because that's just a complete incapacity of, because the church gave up history, that American evangelical theologians do not even know why America is a nation.
So what is the difference between a people group and a nation?
A nation has lots of people group, and a great nation has lots of people groups. Israel was never a nation. Israel had 13 tribes because one of the tribes had become two. Joseph's tribe had become two tribes. So Israel was 13 tribes living together under one law. So tribalism or ethnicity or people groupism was not defining Israel, but being one people under one law. That's what defining Israel. So when Israel split between Israel and Judah, they're all children of Abraham, descendants of Abraham, but they are no longer one nation. They are two nations because there are two geographic boundaries and two governing authorities. So a nation is not a people group. That is a peculiar American nonsense, because of which American Christianity has lost America itself. That we should not be discipling nation, we should be reaching unreached people groups.
Okay, I'm trying to absorb this because we do have the Lord saying to Abraham, "I will make of you a great nation," for example. In fact, the Lord says, "Many nations shall come from you." So you would say that Israel wasn't one of those nations, or how does that work?
In my earlier book called "This Book Changed Everything," I have a long chapter on why USA did not become an empire, why USA became a nation. Not that there were no few times when America tried to be an empire with relationship to Philippines, for example. So imperial instinct was there because theological confusion was there. But on the whole, if India is a nation today, if Africa has nations, it's because of the USA. In 1648, the end of the Reformation, Peace of Westphalia, Holland became the first nation in Europe. Holland was 13 colonies, at some time 8 colonies, ruled by Spain, calling itself Holy Roman Empire. But the 80-year war, which climaxed in the 30-year war in Europe, created the first biblical nation in Europe, because Europe had no concept of nation. Holland became a nation. The mayor of Basel was sent to the conferences, which are called Peace of Westphalia, to ensure that Switzerland becomes a nation. So Holland and Switzerland became the first two nations inspired by the biblical Jewish idea of nation. And because of that, USA became a nation. It could have become 13 kingdoms. The 13 colonies could have become 13 kingdoms. But it became one nation under one law. So many people groups, coming from many different cultures and ethnic backgrounds, becoming one people under one law in one geography, then it was the USA, Franklin Roosevelt, who forced Winston Churchill through what is known as the Atlantic Charter in 1941, in the summer of 1941, that England is as bad as Hitler. Hitler has just started taking over other nations to build German empire. England has been doing that for 200 years, taking other people's lands to build British Empire. So if America helps England defeat Germany and Japan, what happens? Does England begin to rule Germany? Does England begin to rule Japan? So Roosevelt made it a condition that America will enter the war only if Britain agrees to dismantle the British Empire, make all the colonies free, including Israel. So Israel becomes free. Yes, the Zionist movement predated 1948, but essentially it was the American concept of nation, because of which, post-World War II, all the empires were demolished except for the communist empire of Stalin, which continued to rule many countries, including Eastern Germany. So the idea of nation that spread through America, the American theologians forgot. The reason for that was that post-World War II, just when America created United Nations instead of United Empires, Churchill would have wanted America to create united empires, and along with France and Russia and USA can also become an empire and rule over other countries. So after defeating Germany, you rule over Germany. That's what England would have liked to do. But in fact, England was forced to demolish its empire. And this is the power of the Bible, which I've discussed in my previous book. But back to the main point of this interview, that we need a dictionary because secularists do not know what a nation is. They don't know whether national borders are sacred, should be treated as sacred. And evangelicalism in America no longer knows biblical theology.
You know what? I'm going to hold that right here. I want to stop on the dictionary just for a moment, because one of our sponsors, this is an issue that we have been concerned about, and one of our sponsors addresses this topic actually in one of the products.
Yeah, it's a very relevant topic for what we're discussing. A question comes up. Are you having difficulty living according to your worldview? Do you need expert, professional help to get reality to conform to your presuppositions? Sometimes, do you feel like you don't know Jack? Well, now you can with Jack's General Deconstruction, with Jacques Derrida's General Deconstruction. All of Jack's work comes with free logocentrism inspection, free binary opposite inversion, free destabilization of textual meaning, and so much more. Now you can have the reality that suits you, subverting the best to palm off the rest. Since 1966, Jack's General Deconstruction. Of course, it's gotten into education, it's gotten into worldviews, it's gotten into people's sense of reality, and that is largely what you're trying to overturn with this project that you have.
With your disruptive project.
Your disruptive troublemaking project.
That's correct, because most people no longer know that the root of current gender confusion is Hinduism. Through Carl Jung, through new Guru movement, New Age spirituality, goddess spirituality. So the Christians are deeply troubled one professor was telling us yesterday that his 10-year-old daughter in Toronto, he mentioned the word male and female sex. She got very upset. She wanted him to use the word gender. So he had to spend more than an hour explaining to her why he was using the word male sex and female sex. And 10-year-old Christian girl is so brainwashed by school education. But the tragedy is that the Christian intellectual, Christian theology has woken up so late that we do not know that the root is philosophical. It begins with Hinduism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you've by highlighting how upset that young 10-year-old girl got. To me, when I hear those kinds of stories, it reminds me of my youth, of growing up and having my worldview challenged occasionally. Not, thinking that the worldview that, for example, this girl was brainwashed, as you say, into this idea that there's a difference between sex and gender. And of course that leads to, well, there could be many genders, even though there are only two biological sexes. And this becomes all important because it becomes the basis for justifying all kinds of choices that people want to make. Well, what happens is, when she's confronted with the fact that there's somebody who's still holding on to this archaic, problematic, if they want to call it that, view that there really are only two genders that correspond to the two sexes, she gets upset. Why does she get upset? Well, I'm not sure exactly why, but a lot of times it has to do with the idea that old way of thinking led to all kinds of abuses. It led to all kinds of evils in society, discrimination, people being mistreated. And so
that's the belief, at least.
That's the belief, right? We're told that it's inevitable if somebody believes one of these old ways of thinking, that it's it's like catastrophic. I mean, I'm reminded of the episode on All in the Family when Mike Stivic finally realized that I think at the time it was his future father-in-law, Archie Bunker, was a bigot. He finally realized, and he starts screaming at the top of his lungs, prejudice, 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 as if he'd never met anyone before who was bigoted. Well, he who knows whether he had or not, but he became extremely upset at the idea that we have these other worldviews. And that, I think, begins at a very young age, like this girl at 10 years old. And I think what the reason for it is not only that there's this feeling that the other views are dangerous, but there's also the feeling that if I concede, if I grant any territory, if I make any concession to these old, obsolete views, that I'm betraying or I have been betrayed by my teachers, that I've been betrayed maybe even by my parents who taught me these worldviews. So it becomes very emotional. And I think this is why the people such as the communists, the Nazis, Hitler, have said, we want to get them when they're young. We want to indoctrinate them. And you have to, and they know that they're going to be very resistant. The younger you get them, the more resistant they're going to be. And it's going to be something that is very emotional when it happens, when they encounter these other views. And right now, where do we stand? Where do we stand in terms of how much of the current generation is retrievable?
It is retrievable. A reform is possible, a new reformation, if the church would take the responsibility to disciple the nation. So a very simple fact is that if you believe that all reality is one, which is monism or pantheism, whether this oneness is one energy, physical energy, or a collective unconsciousness, as Jung called it, say Brahma, that's what Hindu called it, that everything is God, everything is one, then dualism of male and female becomes very difficult to believe as real. Dualism of good and evil, true and false, becomes very difficult to entertain. That if all reality is one, how can good and evil be opposites? How can true and false be opposite? Everything should be relatively true or relatively false, etc. So this is what Carl Jung, when he was studying Hinduism, because he rejected Freud's atheism, moved towards a Hindu idea of one collective unconsciousness permeating everything. He realized that if the same divine force is in everyone, then both male and female are part of same God, same divinity, same. So he called it anima and animus. These are two male and female sides of the same coin, which is in everyone. So gender is a spectrum. Now, this is what Hinduism had always practiced, so that if you study Tantra or Hindu physiology, that at the bottom of your spinal cord, just above the rectum, is a psychic center which is female, a female chakra. And on top of the crown is the male chakra, Shiva chakra. So Shakti and Shiva, female and male. You have 7 chakras, psychic centers in your body. And through Kundalini yoga, psychic exercises, you awaken your feminine power, which is called serpent power. Kundalini is serpent power coiled up in everyone, and you awaken it. The guru helps you awaken it, very often through sexual exercises. Therefore, sex becomes very important in Hinduism as a means of salvation. And you awaken your female energy, it begins to move up and finally merges with the male energy, and then you become one. So until you have experienced oneness of male and female within you, this is what begins to impact Carl Jung in his thesis of postulate of anima and animus, which then spreads into the New Age movement. In America, the most important guru who taught salvation through sex was Rajneesh, who had a ranch in Oregon with 2 jets and 99 Rolls Royces.
Oh, yes, we remember.
Okay, so it was through him that this whole idea, a new interpretation of monism. So monism was not simply attacking the dualism of male and female, it was attacking the dualism of good and evil.
If I could just pause right there,
Sure.
Get you to pause, because what you're saying is really kind of, for a person as an outsider who looks in on Hinduism, the first thing I think of is not monism. That's not the first thing. I'd have to get really educated, as you are helping me to become right now, because the first thing I see is this incredible polytheism that goes way beyond anything you encounter. It seems to go way beyond in terms of just the sheer number of deities that you encounter in ancient Western paganism.
Well, but the two are related. If everything is one God, then you can worship him in any form. A stone becomes a god,
right?
If you believe it.
I'm just saying
sex becomes God.
Yeah. I'm
So
just saying
sex
that's
worship-
not. I'm just saying it kind of fools us as Westerners.
Yes.
It kind of fools us to look at it and see this incredible deist or divinity diversity, if you will, and then to hear it's monism. It's like,
Yes.
whoa, you wouldn't think that at first.
Yes. But through that, from the Guru movement, it came into the New Age, into goddess spirituality, and now it has captured the Western education, because those New Age mindset, worldview, took over as the American church was waiting for Antichrist to come.
Okay.
It felt that Antichrist must control education that will prepare America for tribulation. So the church was no longer interested, because yes, God's will must be done on earth, but only during the millennium. Right now, we need the Antichrist to come and rule. So this whole mindset has handed over the nation to the devil.
Yeah.
And it is going to be a fight, but as William Carey said, attempt great things for God, expect great things from God. Thomas Chalmers said that no matter how big your vision, it's always too small, because God is able to do immeasurably more than what you can ask or imagine. So the church has to decide whether Jesus is sitting in my heart, is my heart is his throne. Why is he there? Why has he made my heart his throne? Is it the useless throne of Christ? That the useful throne of Christ will be in the third temple in New Jerusalem. Current throne of Christ in my heart is useless throne of Christ. We are the body of Christ, but we are the useless body of Christ, because he cannot do Father's will on this earth through us. He must come in his physical body and sit in Jerusalem to be able to do Father's will. So these eschatological perspectives that have dominated the last 60, 70 years, since 1940 particularly, as the dominant view of eschatology in America, this has been part of the problem, that we want Antichrist's will to be done on earth. We do not want God's will to be done on earth, and we do not want God's will to be done through us, that my heart is his throne. He must do Father's will through me. This is part of the revolution. So although we are seeking to take education back from the state, give it to the church, church has to be reformed. And a reformation is a theological controversy. Therefore, I'm a theological provocateur.
So now you said that these ideas came in through the New Age movement, but it sounds like you also say that they've come in through other ways too. Like Carl Jung was not the New Age movement per se.
He is the grandfather of the New Age movement.
You would say that, okay.
Oh, yes. So people like Marilyn Ferguson, who wrote The Aquarian Conspiracy, Fritz of Capra. Capra is very important at this point. His book, The Tao of Physics. So if the Tao of Physics is really male and female being one, and becoming one in a tantric sexual mysticism. So Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown was actually applying Fritz of Capra. He was a physicist in Berkeley who became a New Age guru through that book, The Tao of Physics. And that was sexual mysticism, which was popularized through Dan Brown's book, The Da Vinci Code. But the origin of it in America goes back to Osho Rajneesh. Osho Rajneesh is from Oregon. It had already come in 1893 through Swami Vivekananda. So the tantric spirituality had already come in America, but it was only after Puritanism became a dirty word in popular culture that Rajneesh was able to preach salvation through sex. So this 10-year-old girl confused about vocabulary of whether sex is the correct word or gender is a correct word, is because the Christian missionary movement has abandoned control of the language. How do you disciple a culture if you let the devil control the language? So that's why we have to, part of this third education revolution is a worldview battle that has to be fought in an encyclopedia.
I like that. Ron and I have often talked about an aspect of this because he has said, and I think rightfully so, and you're really reaffirming this, that language is the coin of exchange in culture. That's how we communicate. That's how we make deals. That's how we describe our self-understanding and understanding of others. If you don't have a dictionary, you really are not, you don't even have the same coin of exchange. You're not facilitating.
And it's gotten to the point where now you need multiple dictionaries because everybody's coming out with their own.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the really important aspect. So to really do missionary work, you have to have a grand scale that says we have to educate people. That is how missionary work is done. It isn't one-on-one discipleship, although that's important. It is a bigger view. Also, what I hear you saying isn't that your eschatological view is necessarily wrong, but that it isn't big enough that, yes, you may be pre-trib, for example. You may be looking for the return of Christ. However, you are to continue living out the faith in an unbelieving world as missionaries and witnesses to what is coming, if it's today or 100 years from now. Would that be correct?
Yes. So when William Carey, a cobbler turned linguist and Bible translator, comes to India as the pioneer of a Protestant missionary movement, he begins to translate the Bible into vernacular languages and gets a lot of others of his colleagues translate the Bible into vernacular languages. But people speak those dialects that have now been turned into literary language through Bible translation, but they don't read and write those vernaculars. So you have to give them dictionary. You have to teach them. So the Bible began to control Indian literature because language is what creates a nation, not ethnicity. In Genesis 11 at the Tower of Babel, it is confusion of the language. All the people in Babel are descendants of Noah. So they are one people group. But now brother cannot understand brother, so they separate. And a brother and his wife begin to develop a dialect with their children. That becomes their language. They are in a geography, identified geography, which becomes their nation. So nation begins with a language and geography, not people group. They were all children of Noah, but language divides them into different nations.
Wow,
through the language is communicated ideas. If truth is communicated through the language and character of God is communicated, virtue is communicated, then you have a great nation, because Abraham will become a great nation. This is Genesis 18, verses 18 and 19, because he will teach his children and his household, his biological children and the non-biological children who are part of his household. He will teach them to do what is just, what is right, God's will. So it is the teaching of truth that makes a nation great, a language great. So a Stone Age tribe has a poor, simple language. A sophisticated nation, a great nation, has a developed language. But the missionary movement, as it goes all over the world, and I can tell you stories from India, stories from Uganda and Africa. Missionaries are giving language to people, because once a dialect has become a literary language, then educational textbooks can be translated, scientific books, law books, economic books, history books, and fiction. So fiction is legitimate because you are communicating ideas, values. Right. So one of my friends has in my book, the book called This Book Changed Everything. There's a chapter on literature, on how all the early novels in India in different vernacular languages are impacted by the Bible. Because the genre of novel didn't exist in India. It didn't exist in Europe either. Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress is the first proto-novel out of which the genre of novel begins. And it is part of reforming literature which is communicating God's truth through stories. But they were very clear that a story is not history. You declare
Gotcha.
it.
Sure.
So yes, the genre of novel fiction is a part of biblical theology, Reformation legacy. But what has happened is that not understanding God wants to bless nations, make them great nations, and that requires great language and literature, and that requires dictionary and encyclopedia. That whole Protestant tradition has been forgotten.
That's important. I teach on worldviews, and one of the things I try to help people understand is everyone gets their worldview by osmosis. It comes from the books we read, the magazines we read, the television we watch, the films we watch, and we don't think about it. It just sort of filters into our brain. But you are adopting ideas. I'm reading a series right now through Audible, which I love. And I like sci-fi kinds of stuff because you learn worldviews, how people think about even the future. And the one I'm reading now it's a Singularity series, and is where a group has downloaded themselves into computerized bodies, basically. So here's the question. Is there such a thing as a soul? And you have 3 volumes of this book, and that really is a central question they're dealing with. Is what you download into the computer simply information about yourself, but your soul doesn't go with it? Is there a soul that is downloadable? It's a great question to kind of deal with, especially in our days of AI now.
That's absolutely true. And that's what the heart of this issue is. So when a teenager says that I'm a male in a female body, implication is that I have a soul which is male, my body is female, but is the soul a permanent metaphysical entity?
Right. Oh, yeah.
But the whole of the Enlightenment movement ended with the assumption that there is no permanent metaphysical entity called soul. So Descartes begins by saying that I think, therefore I am. I can question God, I can doubt the world, I can doubt you exist, but I cannot doubt that I'm doubting. That will be illogical. So
Right.
I doubt or I think, therefore I am. Who is doing the thinking? Now, this is a very important issue in C.S. Lewis's book, Miracle, that is my thought product of brain chemistry? If it is a product of brain chemistry, then it cannot be true, because the product of my brain chemistry disagrees with the product of your brain chemistry. Our ideas disagree. Why should I accept your ideas? If it is truth, what is truth? Truth is a theological concept. So if the West has become post-truth, it's because West has rejected the biblical worldview. And the Christian theologians who are describing the Bible as story and hesitate to say the Bible is truth, that your word is truth, they are actually have uncritically accepted the secular worldview. So in your actually program on Enneagram, you have the pastor who keeps bragging that I am a Wheaton graduate.
Right.
And therefore,
in Cambridge, yeah.
I'm a Wheaton graduate, therefore my theology should be trusted. I believe all truth is God's truth. I know an Enneagram is not true, but it's as true as evolutionary biology or as yoga. Therefore, Wheaton teaches me that evolutionary biology is true, yoga is true, because it works, it helps. Therefore, the question is, David Hume was the one who began demolishing Descartes' argument that on the basis of logic, on the basis of empirical observation, you cannot believe in soul. You think, therefore you are. No. You think, therefore thinking exists. Whether the thinker exists, you exist as a thinker, as a soul, that requires you to prove that every effect has to have a cause. Thinking has to have a cause, the thinker. You haven't proven the causation, therefore your argument is false. So following Hume, people like Immanuel Kant, etc., are still struggling. That does the soul exist? Can we prove without revelation? Can we prove on the basis of logic, on the basis of empiricism, that the soul exists? So by Schopenhauer and Nietzsche, it's clear that the Enlightenment, rationalism, empiricism cannot prove that soul exists. Therefore, Freud begins to do psychology without faith in psyche, existence of soul. So soul doesn't exist. Then to say that I'm a female in a male body, what does that language mean? That does a soul exist, which is feminine, trapped in a masculine body? So the intellectual world in the West has become totally confused because this intellectual world was built upon the Word of God. If God exists as a triune being, then unity and diversity can both be real. One God can create man in his image, male and female. Female is God's image as much as male is God's image. Two are different because unity and diversity are true in God. Without the presupposition of Trinity, without the presupposition of revelation, there is no basis for believing that male and female are real. But when you begin to deny the reality of male and female, you as a intellectual civilization get lost.
Wow. All right. We're running down. We're like at about a minute and a half or so, 3 minutes maybe. It depends on Ron, really.
I'm flexible today, so we can go on.
You're flexible. You lost some weight, so now you're more flexible. Is that
yeah, pretty much.
I want to touch on something that we touched on. This is such a big topic. We're going to have to do more on this. This is really important. But I had quoted that you said this education will also train thought leaders by offering courses in classic books, ideas, and biographies that have impacted history for better or worse. Now, even though you include that, you and Ron had a bit of discussion regarding someone named Adler on the concept of classic books. You think it's important, but it is insufficient. Would that be a fair observation?
Yes. Adler shocked the intellectual world in America in 1940s when the Orthodox Jewish Seminary in New York called intellectuals to come together because Jews were running away from Germany, from Europe to America. Are they safe in America? How do you make America safe for democracy, human rights, etc.? And Adler was a liberal Jew. He was born a Jew, but at the age of 14, he had started reading Aquinas and then Aristotle. And he had come to the conclusion that America was already lost. And he argued on the first day of that conference that a much greater threat to America's future was a typical university professor, much greater than Hitler. A greater threat than Hitler was a university professor. So this had been understood by intellectuals during the Second World War, that Hitler is a product of ideas that have been taught in German universities. And those ideas are now being taught in America. And therefore, American can become much worse than fascist Germany. So Adler was already trying to solve the problem of nihilism being taught in Western university. by bringing great books. So the great books curriculum, which began in Columbia, but Adler was invited by the president of Chicago University to come, Hutchins, to come and start the great books curriculum in Chicago. Now, John Dewey, who was already the father of secular education in America, he dismissed Adler on the grounds that 300 years ago, 400 years ago, Europe could teach Aquinas and Aristotle because Europe had a pope, an intellectual authority, which could tell the universities what to teach, what not to teach. But America has no such pope, and therefore nobody's going to be interested in Aquinas and Aristotle. Now, that's the point that much later in 1980s, Alan Bloom, a professor from Chicago, made in his book, The Closing of the American Mind, that the great books make no sense because high school students, their parents, and their universities is not interested in great books, because great books of Western civilization or great music or great arts, great literature, great architecture, none of this makes sense without the Bible. The Western civilization is a product, a fruit of the Bible. You reject the Bible, you cannot understand Shakespeare.
Okay, now, before we end for today, because we are definitely going to have to do probably several more programs on this, and we might need to talk about perhaps creating a conference just on this topic to bring people together to say, here's how we need to do this.
Please, sure.
I don't even know what that would look like at this point, but it's such an important topic. Tom Holland, atheist Tom Holland, who's now calling himself a Christian atheist, oddly enough, did an interesting book, which others have tackled this topic. Alvin Schmid did Under the Influence, How Christianity Transformed Civilization. You did a book of a similar topic. His is Dominion, and as an atheist, he's going, we would not have Western culture if it were not for Christianity. In other words, without the Bible and without believers as missionaries, witnesses to the teachings of Scripture, we would not even be able to have a woke society today, because that all comes out of biblical teaching, basically. So what you're arguing is the church has lost its way, really, in being the thought leader, thought shaper of culture, giving it away to secular society. And what we need to do is, as a body of believers, if we really believe what scriptures teach, we need to take back the fundamental shaping influence in anyone's life, which is education.
Yes. So I would very much endorse your proposal that we need a conference and we need a live conference, in-person conference, which is recorded and broadcast live and would be very helpful. But however you do it, I think this would be a wonderful service to global Christianity, because a Reformation is a theological disruption.
Yes.
And we are, what I'm saying, some of the things is questioning the way American Christianity went post D.L. Moody. The anti-intellectualism which grew in Moody Bible Institute and developed from there, which has impacted Pentecostalism, charismatic movement, all of it, has to be re-examined if the church has to take responsibility for discipling the USA and other nations.
Okay. Well, we are going to have to start wrapping it up for today. In the next week or so, I'll reach out and we'll pick another date, because I'm very engaged in this. And my church is talking about how do we help not only our church family, but our area, and education we have been talking about is a way to introduce families to the faith. What you're saying is it is central to the faith.
Yeah, I would be glad to come to your church in 6 weeks to release the book, and we can have one event in the evening and then plan a conference.
Well, financially, I don't know if we could pull that off. We have kind of a small church, but
I'm not paid anything by anybody to do what I'm doing.
I understand.
So none of us, we are a global team. Nobody's paid anything. So we aren't doing this as a project for money.
No, I appreciate that, but there's still expenses involved, and we want to serve you well, and we want to serve the body of Christ well. So we'll talk about it. I'm not saying no. I'm saying we'll talk about it.
You're saying we'll talk about it.
We'll talk about it. Vishal, if you can hold on a minute, we're going to have Ron kind of duck walk us out of here.
Is that what we're calling it now? The duck walk?
Yeah, for today, we'll be duck walking.
Okay, well, then our resident cult leader profiler is Neil before me. Our wardrobe manager is See How It Fits You. Our culinary services are provided by Chef Ham and Cheese. Our tinfoil hat provisioner is Just In Case. Jehovah's Witnesses coverage comes from Armageddon and The Opposer. Mormon Archives manager is Polly Gummas. Our liberal denominations bureau chief is, I can say this right, Lucy Goosey. Transgender issues coverage comes from Ben Hur, our special correspondent for cults based on the Hindenburg disaster and flying turkeys. Oh, Dehumanity, our fact-checking supervisor is Yoleg Pulling. Technical assistance comes through Murky Research. Our legal advisors are at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham & Howe. Our grievance resolution director is Giovanna Pisami. Our director of privacy assurance is Wiretapping. And original idea sourcing comes from Drew A. Blank. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc., in cooperation with Emergency Manicure Productions, both of whom are solely responsible for this content, although you will never prove that in a court of law.
Never.
Ain't gonna happen.
All right. Vishal, hold on. Everyone else, we will see you
Hasta la vista, baby.
next week.